Hollywood has to do a lot better job. I mean, we have such a diverse country. We don't call this a melting pot for nothing. We have such a diverse country, and the way that cultures are not represented. And, you know, somebody mentioned the other night here, I think, at the Women in Comedy panel about the Farewell. You know, how hard it was to get that film made, because, like, who wants to see a Chinese family? Guess what? You know, tens of thousands of people in this country millions wanted to see that movie. So I don't think they're doing a good job at all. I think they should do what I'm doing. I'm doing a film with all, you know, people of color in it. So, you know, I think the diversity is here, and maybe Hollywood just has to catch up with what people really want to see. And I do think that, you know, something Beth said about story, I think that's it. The story's the thing. And stories translate. It doesn't matter, you know, what color or what background you are. A story, we're all humans. Lowest common denominator, we're all humans. And stories really are, to me, what make the difference in entertainment, and what can make the difference. You know, the story doesn't have to be cast a certain way. It can be the story of the people that it's the story of. So I think that's the way, and as far as I know, that they should go forward in terms of Hollywood. Uh-oh.
I better pass this one, it's my phone.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
I thought I turned it off.
Story, drama.
Who's calling?
Who is it, Diana?
CBS.
Oh, God.
So Hollywood is based on making money, right? It's a capitalistic machine that wants to make a profit. And what has been happening in the last few years is that due to the change of more outlets for people being able to see content, and due to the demographics of America are not a white majority, right? And Hollywood is figuring out that in order to continue to make money, they need to make films for different audiences. So I think what's really important, and I think where the truth test will be for Hollywood and the film industry, is who is allowed the access and the money to tell those stories, right? Because we can all tell stories about anyone, and it that should remain, right? The creative process is the creative process. But in my opinion, the access to film funding and investment and distribution needs to be equalized, so anyone who wants to tell a story can tell a story. And I don't think we've seen that tipping point yet, but Hollywood is onto the fact that they need to represent different people's stories in order to make money, for better or for worse, right?
That's exactly it. It's a business. It's the entertainment business. It's, you know, filmmakers have this lofty ideal of art that we create, and it's really important. But the backdrop of this entire thing is business. People forget that television was not created for TV shows. It was created to sell commercials, to sell products. The TV shows were a byproduct of the advertising for the coffee or the tea or the car or whatever. So that's the foundation. So any change that has happened recently, we like to think that it's been because of activism and protests and some goodwill, but the truth is America has lost its place in so many ways. You know, the Nigerian film market is huge. The Chinese film market is huge. We can't touch the money that's made in China in the film industry. The streaming services, however, have changed the shape of the business, because most Americans now are on Netflix watching things internationally, and people internationally are watching things local to their region, their cultures, so they're not, besides the Marvel movies and the big American releases, they're creating content for themselves. So Hollywood is like, how do we capitalize on all of this? It's the equivalent of, when people stopped smoking as much in America, what did they do? They shifted the market globally. They needed to evict those kids because we got these kids taken care of. We're protecting these kids. But when I was in Africa in the 2000s, and advertising for Marlboro and cigarettes were everywhere for young people because they had to expand. So, and that's what's happening right now. And there's good and bad to that.
Thank you. So if we shift away from Hollywood for a little bit, and all of you are independent filmmakers, so talk about the freedom you have as an independent filmmaker versus someone that, is working for a studio or a Hollywood typical filmmaker.
Well, freedoms, well, never mind, I won't give you that quote. Freedom, yes.
Say it.
We have lots and lots of freedom as independent filmmakers, at least in my experience. But, again, it's like access to the financing is what makes a difference if you want to make a film of any size. Now, the democratization, I think, of storytelling is certainly, to tell you the truth, when I first started in the film business, we were shooting in 16 because nobody wanted the ugly video. It just was ugly in those days. And video has come a long way. But the great thing is about telling stories is that you can do a film on your iPhone now or your Android phone. So, and what was the question? Oh, yeah.
Freedom.
Yeah, freedom. So there's a lot of freedom there. There's a lot of freedom. And as an independent filmmaker, yes, I have worked on the other side. I've worked for an industry, and I've worked, not in the Hollywood business, but I've worked where clients have dictated what they wanted to see, and that was not a lot of fun. But hey, sometimes some work you do for money, and some work you do for love. As far as my career has been. So now there is a lot more, I don't have to worry about, okay, they're not going to want this documentary about, a Pakistani woman, an African-American woman, a Latina, and a white woman. Who's going to want these stories? Well, I don't have to worry about that really, because we do have access to CPB grants. We do have access to Kickstarter, Seed and Spark. So, and there's always getting by with a little help from your friends too. So I think, I feel like that kind of, and certain auteurs have always had the freedom. I mean, Spike Lee can do whatever he wants to do. Woody Allen could do whatever he wanted to do. So when you know how to bring in the money, you can get that freedom even in Hollywood. So, it just depends on where what your goals are, and what you envision for the work that you're doing. So I'll pass it on.
Is anyone a filmmaker? Is anyone a filmmaker in the audience? See, I don't need that. Yeah. So I'm going to take a slightly, yes, I think you can potentially have more creative freedom as an independent filmmaker, although you are beholden to how you want to distribute your film, and how you want to finance your film, right? I'm going to take the thing I've really appreciated about making independent films is actually the ability and the power to give other people opportunities through the production of that film. So at Stockade Works, we train people to work locally in film and television. We were talking before this panel about how film can be pretty driven by nepotism without meaning to, right? Like, hey, I need to hire a gaffer. What gaffer do you know, right? And so there are lots of people who are overlooked because no one knows that they even exist. And so I really try to make it a point when I'm making an independent film where there aren't things being dictated to me or to the project, to do the work to find the people to give opportunities on the film. And that is something that you lose the bigger and bigger your budget gets.
That is such a beautiful answer, actually. Both answers, but there's, because you tackled the creative. Yes, I can I have a choice of story I want to tell. And yes, I can hire who I might want to hire, and that's how I make films. I always give people chances who haven't had an opportunity, because then the process becomes as interesting as the product. Someone learned on this movie, so if my movie sucks, it's okay because it did something in the world. And so I appreciate that part of the process. However, when you get to distribution and you get to funding, financing, so I'd say, it's hard as hell being an independent filmmaker. And and freedom, there is a price. Even Spike, when he, with our creative, artistic freedoms that he quote unquote has, that company is gonna say no, because this particular thing is too edgy, so change it. Spike says no, he has to shop it around to some other places, they're gonna release it. So your freedom has limits. Your creative expression has limits. So that I think there's a huge debate about what is an independent filmmaker these days, because even independent filmmakers who are raising their own money are starting out with a named person on their cast so that they can put someone on the poster so they can get distribution before they put their movie out. So it comes at a price. For me though, I have to go just back to the basics. When I get to cast a child who's never acted before, and it's only my decision, and put someone in hair and makeup who's never done hair and makeup on a film set before, there's something magical about that part of it. The other stuff I don't have any control over.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now we're gonna probably spice it up a little bit. So, as filmmakers, you deal with challenges. Now, looking on the outside, what do you see being the biggest challenge in film in regards to race?
Let's start at the other end. I'm always starting.
Yeah. I don't know, man. This is America. And America has issues with race beyond film, and it just trickles down. We don't know anything about our history. And from time Thomas Edison first put an image on celluloid, some of those images were racist. We don't talk about that. It's the foundation of what we do. Segregation, Jim Crow segregation, and editing were invented at the same time. It's part of the story, but it's not taught. I try to infuse this and teach it to my privileged white students all the time so they understand what they're entering into. The power that you have with that image to distort, to, you're not bombing, killing, lynching, raping until the movies give you permission. It's the foundation. That's what has defined so much of how we see the world. So what's interesting now is, and they think I'm angry or pessimistic, but I'm just a historian. There's all this black content that's coming out now, and people are like, yes, Black Panther, and this person's just made this movie, and this made this movie. Your Revolution sponsored by Disney. There's always this, for me, this tough conversation. I don't think the diversity that we see now with the amount of shows and stories that are happening would be happening if Mike Brown, Trayvon Martin, and all those black men and women had been killed on camera in the last 7 or 8 years. It was the liberal white guilt that infused and informed this thing. So now let's start this program. Let's give this thing a chance. Let's give that a chance. And that also reflects what happened to the Me Too movement. All these assaults and these accusations and this, and so that guilt started emerging. It's not talking about responsibility. Like, there's people who are responsible and who are allies, but there's more guilt than responsibility. And so now let's make sure that women have a chance at a show or at this and at that. And so it's not something that's talked about, but Hollywood pats itself on the back without going to the root causes of what's actually wrong. And so, you know, I hope this answers the question, but for me it's still I'm asking the question, not answering it. Like, where are we with this subject matter? Is it better to just be a part of, because I see myself on television or in the movie, that I'm happy, but I can walk outside and get shot and get no justice? Where is race in that conversation?
I mean, I don't know if I have any, what he said. I'm gonna once again talk about kind of the worker aspect of film, because I think what you just said to me was spot on and nothing to add. As an industry that's accessible for everyone to be able to work in, I think that there are some changes that we have to do with how people are expected to work on film and television sets. So we're looking at extremely long days. You must have access to transportation. You cannot be late for set no matter what, or you'll probably get fired. There is no childcare on set. If you're a single parent, you know, good luck. Find a friend or a family member. You can make a good living. It's a quality job, but right now the way budgets are set up, you make that good living by working overtime and double overtime and things like that. And so as a system for workers, there are only certain types of people with certain types of privilege that can maintain a career in film and television. And I would like to see that change, looking at things like French hours, 8-hour shoot days. You know, it doesn't, we're trying to start a study for this to look at budget comparisons and things like that. But I think if we could change the way actual films are made for the workers, it would help open up access for people.
Can you please just add to that the complexion of sets, like what they look like?
Oh, yeah, so there's who you see on camera, right? And then there's the hundreds of people that work on a film, right? And the vast majority of that crew is still white and male, right? And I just spoke to many of the reasons why. You have to know someone to get your first job. You know, you have to have transportation, access, a certain amount of freedom to work in it. But yeah, diversifying the crew to me is just as important as diversifying what's happening on screen.
You know, something that you said about our history really struck a chord in me, because, you know, I think it was Maya Angelou who said that for Black people to be free, white people have to know their history. That it has to all evolve together. And this was, to me, is very profound. I was just talking earlier about a pie in the sky dream project about Bacon's Rebellion, which is our history that we don't know. And there's a lot of our history that we don't know. I mean, in order to create what was created in this country, you have to build up myths, and you have to build these up with a purpose. And these myths have been built up for us. And dismantling all of that is going to take all of us a long time. I mean, why were the 4 Mount Rushmore presidents carved in the sacred Badlands? Really? Well, because 2 birds with 1 stone. We can build up our myths, and we can destroy the very fiber of that native community. So this is something that I think about quite a lot, because just because it's part of my you know, dreams for the way that I work and the people that I work with. And it would be great. And I think, you know, being on a set or being on a film shoot where you'd have, you know, mixed races and as many women as you have men would just be, that's my dream. That's definitely my dream. And how we're going to get there, You know, I am hopeful, but I do think the road is long. And I think it takes more of us to want this. More of us white people, to not be afraid that we're gonna lose what we have. I mean, fear is all, for me, is all about either I'm not gonna get what I want or I'm gonna lose what I have. That's what it comes down to for me when it comes to fear. And I think fear is a big part of what's going on with race relations in this country. And I do think we've moved a little bit because we're having the conversation. You know, we feel free enough to have the conversation. Just like with the I was talking to Tarana Burke 2 weekends ago. Just like with the Me Too movement, women now feel like they can report things that go on. Not all women, but in some instances. And that there's not a free pass anymore. There's not a free pass anymore. You know, so I feel a bit hopeful. Yeah.
So piggybacking off of the Me Too movement, how do you all feel that, have you seen any changes so far, before and after, when Me Too hit the scene?
Yeah, I mean, just what I was talking about. I don't know statistically what the changes are. I don't know if less women are being attacked or harassed on the job, or I don't know those statistics yet. But I do see a change because, you know, starting the conversation, you know, and God bless Tarana Burke for starting that whole Me Too movement. I mean, and she told me that within, I think, 8 hours, I don't know how many million responses she had, millions. And this is not somebody who had a name for herself before this happened, you know, but she just had the idea to try to see if other women, you know, had something to say about this too. So I think that that there is hope, you know, there is hope for this. And I really feel that the conversation is really, really important, and that we can all take part in the conversation. We all have opinions, you know.
Yeah, and I think now is the time for people to, like, for white people to help white women to help white women become more understanding, and for white men to help white men become healthier males, right? Or however it goes, because I also see we're on the heels of the inception of the Me Too movement, and there's already a significant backlash against it, right? And that's what it's what the world does. Something, you know, we 2 steps forward, 5 steps backwards. But it's pretty amazing how quick I hear people touting the other side. Wow, well, that's not true. You know, the onus still falls on the woman to prove that she is truthful and not making it up and not doing it to get ahead in the world. So I do think it's hopeful, and I think it's going to still be a long road to real change.
Yeah, I think as a historian said that, you know, if you are oppressed for this much time, then it's probably take that much, the equal amount of time to be released from your oppression. So if these things just started happening or just started being spoken about, then what change has really happened? You know, what change has really happened significantly? Right now we're reacting to the shock initial injection, but it hasn't gotten through all of our veins yet. It's gonna take a few generations probably of this understanding. I'd be curious to find out, because before Me Too, there were women in the industry who made it their point and their mission to hire females. And there were other women who were clueless, white women who I know were very senior, who were like, oh, I didn't think about that, because their path was different. So they weren't thinking about how they could support other women. And so you have these divergent things. I think what has changed, though, is those people who were willing and interested in hiring people and supporting and mentoring feel like they have a little bit more oomph or support or backing to do what they should have been doing or what they were already doing. That's the big thing. I'm a member of the Directors Guild, and so they always do the studies about how many female directors have been hired, and the number ticks up and then it ticks down, and then it ticks up a little bit, and then it ticks down. And normally when it ticks up, it's because one showrunner decides, I'm only gonna hire female directors this season. And so now a network looks good or a show looks good, but the rest of the shows are directed by men. And so it's kind of like weather versus climate. The weather is sporadic right now, and I don't know how it's gonna look later on, but the climate has not been good, and we'll see how that change happens.
Yeah, I mean, just, I know myself that there are women now who walk onto a set and they're in positions of power, and they are going to say, wait a minute, guys, where are all my sisters? So it is happening, and it might be happening slowly, but it's definitely happening. And the numbers I just found out are a bit up for women being hired in the Hollywood part of the industry. So.
Right, the systemic cultural change in the industry, though, is what I think about as being like our long haul, right? So language that's used on set or in a production company, how women are still seen as objects, whether it's on camera or in an office, right? And those are the things that, there's a whole vernacular of language on a film set that is still sexist and racist, right? But it's been embedded in people's heads for so many years, they don't even think about what they're calling something, right? So I think that now is the time to also open that up and make a woman or a person of color feel safe in the place that they're working in.
Also, just to complicate matters just a little bit, there's on set and crewing, you're not going to see many female people or white people. But, Hollywood's prejudice is it's okay to have a female editor. It's okay to have female producers, particularly white female producers. And so there are people who don't understand or who can look at this industry and go, oh, there's all these white women doing all these things, all these women who are in these other positions, but rarely are they in that position of director. And rarely are they in that position of being on the set and making things happen. And when I teach my female students, the ones who are afraid of the camera, I tell them, take it from the boys. Take it, and it's yes, and I'm prejudiced. I'm like, no, if you need to know today if you might be a DP, but don't let them decide for it because they walk towards it first. And if you don't like it, then don't do it. But a lot of them don't even touch the camera because they don't feel like it's their place to touch the camera. And I feel like in just having them touch it, they've changed, some of them have changed their destiny.
Yes, thank you for doing that. That's great.
I was 3 years ago, Hilary Swank did an interview, and she was talking about how she was offered a job on a film, and she was offered $500,000 for her salary, where her male counterpart was offered $10 million, even though this is after she won 2 Academy Awards, and the male counterpart really didn't have any critical acclaim whatsoever. He was just hot. So, laying that out there, and this is 3 years ago, do you see a difference with the gender pay gap in regards to film?
It's not really my, I'm a documentary maker, so we don't talk about $500,000.
No one
Anybody
makes
getting paid $500,000.
Yeah, no one makes any money out of it.
But I did, we did just do a program at Uplift, Upstate Women in Film and Television, which if you all are interested in women and interested in being a part of that kind of a community, check us out. We did just have a program where we discussed this and with some knowledgeable women in the industry, and it seems that this is still happening quite a bit, that the pay gap is still huge. So, I don't know, that's gonna take a while, I guess.
It's just like any other industry, there's still a pay gap, right? And hopefully we can tackle this in the next few years, you know, but yes, it still happens quite frequently.
I'm from the hood, so I see it a little differently. I live in a country that's a hustle.
Yeah.
America is a hustle. It's a good hustle sometimes, because some of us benefit from the hustle, but it is a hustle. Like, just think about the basis, and I live in a capitalist system, so I'm a part of the system. But, you know, if something is manufactured in a country for 10 cents, and I sell it to you for $1, but you come along and say, hey, I got $5, can I have one? I'm like, sure. That's capitalism. You don't the price, the value, it's just you want it. And you said 5. And so somebody else comes and says 10. It's supply and demand. Also, you know, until we all get together and say, I'm only paying $1, that's what it's actually worth, or I'm only paying 50 cents, but that's not happening. So the hustle part is, you know, that's our system. The hustle part for me is that they're gonna pay people because of the prejudices that exist. They're gonna get away with whatever they can because they're thinking like business people. They don't care about Hillary Swank feeding her family. They probably don't care about that man, but the culture did at one point, and so it was established in a particular way. So, you know, some part of it is about knowing your own value, and so there's things that have to be changed underneath all of this, but it's a hustle, and they're gonna try to get over on you. But you have to make a decision. Like, I've turned down, it's just me, this is not male, female, I've turned down projects because I didn't think they represented my people or myself well. And those projects made money, but they were not good films or good stories. And I look back 5 years later and go, my mom still works at McDonald's. Like, if I had done that film, could I have paid off her mortgage and got her out of that job and let her travel the world? And the price would have been to make a movie about a girl with a fat ass and going to college and, you know, it's a real question. That's reality. That's the nuance of it. It's not black or white. It was Hillary Swank in a position to look at her salary and go, no. Or was she like, you know what, I need this. It's a hustle.
Yeah, the hustle is still strong. I only brought it up because it seems that there's always a gender pay gap in every industry, but I think obviously because of the platform, we hear about it more in entertainment than anything else because that platform is there. So I want to ask this question. What do you feel are the toughest challenges in film right now?
Now we should start in the middle.
I don't have an answer yet.
Oh, okay. The toughest challenges in film right now. Well, I think always the challenge is to do the story that you want to do, because it's a market economy. I mean, you can't do the story that you want to do, but however, you know, some of us do, and some filmmakers do that. So it depends on where you're coming from. You know, are you a documentary person? Are you in Hollywood? It depends on where you're coming from. But I think the challenges for the industry are something we talked about before, and that's really reflecting the audience, because I think the audiences are going to more and more demand that they see their stories. You know, the women that I'm making this film on now I started this film because they were telling me when I was volunteering down in the city for a few years, hey, you're a filmmaker, we gotta see it to be it. We gotta see ourselves to up on the screen, to be able to, we want our stories out there, in other words. You gotta see it to be it. And I think I'm hoping that that's gonna happen more and more, that different communities are gonna wanna see their stories and maybe even find their own filmmakers. And it's not impossible that a film gets made that is totally out of the system and goes into a film festival and then becomes a big hit, because Hollywood is not going to initiate the changes. they're gonna have to be led to the changes. They're gonna have to see, oh, wait a second, Farewell made all that money. Geez, who knew? I don't think they're gonna come out and want to make changes. And again, I think, it's about participating. It's about standing up. Americans, to me, seem to be pretty docile people. I'm an American. But, I've been out there marching for many years, and I see that in Hong Kong, they've been out for weeks. In Ecuador, they've been out. It seems to me that other cultures are much more participatory than our culture is. So, what's happening out there, America? Don't we need to start thinking, what do we want our country to look like? What do we want? How do we want to treat each other? I think that's how it's going to happen, because I don't see Hollywood saying, oh, gee, let's make a movie about this little population. They have a great story, but it might not make any money. Do you?
I think that there has to be a power shift at the very top of who's making the decisions when it comes to distribution and financing. I think that's one critical shift that will help. I also think that while we wait for that to happen, because it will take time, I think that there are a lot more opportunities because of technology and social media and self-distribution to make the stories you want to make and create distribution so that those stories can reach people and have impact. And you can separate the success of your story from what you think success is from a Hollywood perspective, right? You can do community screenings, you can take it to schools, you can inspire other people with the story you made. And it was a big turning point in my career when I realized that getting into Sundance or winning an Academy Award was a very small percentage of what success meant to a story in the world.
Yeah, I mean, those answers are it. The one thing I would add, and this goes off of this story again, is because it's such a big question, but in my travels, I literally just got back from Timor-Leste, East Timor, other side of the world. I'm still jet lagged, and I'm working in a country that's 18 years old. 70% of the population is under the age of 35 because of the massacres that happened there. I've done film workshops there in Nigeria with Aboriginals in Australia, Ukraine and Crimea actually, and in Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago, and I come to NYU and teach there. And I'm not, I guess, trying to be lofty or oversimplify things, but the biggest challenge is the same challenge that has existed since the film business started, but it's more evident now because of all of the opportunities and the technology that has liberated everyone, and the different venues that you can show your stuff and the myriad of film festivals. What becomes difficult is, what story do I tell? And how do I tell it well? And that is the thing that kind of unifies all of us, and it also is it will be the biggest problem. So let's take race, class, sex, gender, whoever is gonna green light it, not green light it. I think when you're sitting in that room alone staring at a blank screen or a piece of paper, it's like, Philip Seymour Hoffman said to me once, does this film need to exist, and does it need to exist right now? And asking yourself that question and putting pen to paper, that's not easy. Because and then you're burdened with, is anyone gonna wanna see it, and this, that, is it good enough? All those things that are happening, but it is story. I also teach my students, I say this everywhere, film is just a medium. It is just a medium. It's a sexy medium and people love it and they run to it and they like the red carpets, but it's just a medium. if the power goes out, there's no film festival. There's no film industry. If the power goes out, it's done. And the power could go out. We think it can't, but it can. And what remains? Storytelling. We are storytellers. And this just happens to be the medium that we're working in. And so I think the hardest thing is just finding that story and telling it.
Yeah. You know, I just wanted to add to that. I don't know if you had a question about this, but that is, you know, for anybody who's wanting to get into filmmaking, to me, and this is my humble opinion, the number one thing that you need to have to make a film is imagination and an idea. The idea is everything. That's really all you need. You need to have your own ideas. How do you see the world? What do you have to say? What do you want to say? Because there's plenty of us, there's plenty of people around that will show you, you know, how to use the camera, how to get a camera person, how to raise the money. There's lots of help in this industry, but you need to have the idea, and then to go with the idea, the passion. Because I'll tell you, in my business, I think the amount of time that a person spends making a documentary, I think the average is up to like 9 years. Like 9 years. 9 years of your life. So you've got to have that passion, because that's what fuels the idea. And to me, those are the only two things you really need. I don't know, maybe I'm naive.
And your ideas need to be so good that they're worth stealing.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Do any of you remember maybe a specific experience of a decision you made on a project, maybe something that you would have changed your mind about? You know, maybe you made a choice that now, in hindsight, you think, maybe I should have chose something different. And if so, what was that?
There's so many. Having 10 children on the same cast as a dog that nips at people, and a little girl that got bit in the eye. But what I did right was the day before, I doubled my insurance. So, and the mother didn't even sue me. But honestly, are you talking about creative decisions and?
Any type of decision.
Well, yeah, I mean, not being the first person off the plane when you land in the Amazon if you're a woman and you don't speak Portuguese and you're going into a government-held area, because they might stick a gun in your stomach and say, "No mujeres." And I would not have been. I would have sent a guy off the plane first. Let him get shot.
What does that mean?
No women.
No women.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Man, it's so many. Like I really, you know, that's probably the toughest thing. I guess it's gonna be real personal, but there's things that have happened on set that resonate with me. But in the last couple years, people I've been working with documentaries on have like betrayed me or stolen the story and took my hard drives and tried to do something. And the amount of ego, insecurity. If I could have avoided losing relationships and friendships because people saw an opportunity for quick success or fame. Like there's people I've worked with who I would give them, they come to me with a script or an idea and I'll give them some notes and I'm attached to the film. They got my notes though, they're like gone. And the friendship is gone. And I'm like, I had more notes. But the friendship is already gone because the betrayal or their success is more important. I literally didn't know the answer to that question until you started speaking. I was like, the set stuff, all that stuff has happened, but I think that I mourn the friendships and the relationships that I've lost because of it. But maybe it happened for a reason, and if I could change it, I wish this business didn't take those away from me.
Yeah, and I just have to go back to that success conundrum that I mentioned before, and why do we make film, or why do we tell stories? And there was this specific instance, it was the first documentary that I had directed, and it had already, it was gonna be on PBS and great, and it was doing somewhat well, and we had an opportunity to screen it at a film festival that would make it eligible for Academy submission, right? But you had to pay a decent amount of money to get your film to be able to screen in the right kind of theater, in the right format. And so we raised all this money to do that, right? And the film had a great audience. It is about refugees, and it played in a lot of refugee camps and stuff. But I thought about that money, that 20 grand we raised, right? To get this into a couple theaters in LA. And I thought, wow, I could have helped so many people's lives through bringing this film to them, or the people in the film to them. And I was like, what an idiotic thing. Like, why? It didn't win an Academy Award, but even if it did, I think I would feel the same exact way right now. Like, why do I hold my sense of success up to a subjective group of people's idea about that success? Whether it means it made a lot of money, it won an award, it went to a certain film festival. So I would have done that differently in hindsight.
Yes, thank you. So, obviously this is all about diversity, so I will ask this last question before we go to the audience. So, it's a doozy. You ready? What type of practical advice would you give someone who wants to start out in film who is not a white man?
I'm not in the habit of giving advice to white men anyway, so.
Not
Oh, who's not, yeah, well, that would be most of the people that I might talk to, but I think I already gave that. I think, there's a big community wherever you are in film, and if you want to make a film, that's your passion, I would just, start talking to the first person, connect the dots, and if they can't help you, say, do you have somebody else that I can talk to? And just go to the next person. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
I mean, I'm sticking by my first answer. I think you need a great idea, one that somebody might want to steal, and a lot of passion.
I'll speak to not directing, producing, acting, right, but more getting jobs on set and working in the industry. I would say, number one, if you get that opportunity, make sure you make the most of it. Look for things that need to be done. Be the first person to do them. Make yourself noticed as the most helpful, resourceful person there. And it's harder to do when you're a woman or person of color, right? And know when to use your voice to get ahead, right? It's not when you're bringing the water to the camera person when they're about to shoot a shot. But you keep bringing that water to the camera person, they're gonna know your name, and you're gonna be able to get coffee with them when the film is over, right? So.
As a general thing, process over product. Whatever that person, minority, female, is doing, like, value the process. Even on a bad set where you're being denigrated, you're learning your craft. And you can take that knowledge to the next place. That's a part of the resilience that you have to have in this. I've known a lot of black people who left sets because of how they felt like they were treated. And I'm thinking to myself, you know how many people stood on plantations picking cotton? Like, wow. I know you sensitive, but there's something else here on the other side of this thing, whether it's a story you tell and you take it to the next person, or but you're learning a craft. And if I'm working with a blacksmith that's racist, I'm gonna learn the hell out of how to shape that horseshoe or whatever. I'm gonna take that knowledge. There's students who I have who don't want a white teacher because they only teach white stuff. I'm like, white stuff is good stuff if you take it and learn it and know how to use it. So process over just the end result. but but the most important thing is when you're a minority of any kind, and I think this goes to white men as well, my white people out there, respect. I think people, because of the business, the way it's shaped, people are afraid of their own voices. If you're a white male and you see the world a particular way and everyone sees it differently, it's how you see the world that makes you distinct. And I think people are afraid of how they see the world. It's the shit in the back of our heads that no one can hear. That's what makes you you. It makes your writing unique and your storytelling unique. And you gotta embrace that. And that goes for that black kid in the South Bronx and the kid in Jamaica and the kid in East Timor and the kid in Nigeria. Instead of trying to make what Hollywood is making or what that person is making or what that LGBTQ person is making, because that's the hot shit right now. Stop chasing other people's stories and find what that voice is inside of you and use that. The thing that alienates you, makes you a pariah from the rest of the business or from other people, from even your own culture. I'm lesbian, but all those other lesbians don't like me. Good. Why not? And what is it about how you see the others in your group or your crew, and you write that story? So it is your voice that is going to help you. And it's not just in the writing, but it's in the directing, and it's the producing and the editing. I think people are so eager to be a part of the system, they forget that the system benefits when they're a unique part of the system and a distinct part of the system and a special part of the system. That is crucial.
Well said.
That's some real sciencey drop right there. So, let's get a round of applause for that. I was like, damn. So thank you, everyone. We are open to questions from the audience, so don't be shy. Yes, sir.
First, I want to say thank you all for those insightful words. I walked away from the film business as an actor years ago, and went into teaching history, and now as an elected official. And my dream is to go back into the film business once I get that teacher retirement set up. And that pension is important.
I agree on that.
So we're watching this film business, the motion picture industry, evolve into various different things because it is a medium, and we're seeing various different platforms and having access to this medium from different perspectives and different platforms online, access to the World Wide Web, et cetera, et cetera. And with looking at it through a sociological lens, I want to know from you all, because of this thing, race, which is a matter of a sticky matter, it's a volatile issue in America, and it does transform into the film industry or the medium. What are your thoughts on Tyler Perry and what he just did by creating his own Hollywood in Atlanta, Georgia? What are your thoughts on this 152-acre film studio that he has created?
Go ahead.
I had issues with Tyler Perry's work. I wasn't impressed with his filmmaking, but here's the problem. I couldn't watch his films. I couldn't sit down through it. It wasn't my style. But interestingly enough, after I won Sundance with my independent film, my cousin comes up to me and is like, "Why don't you make films like Tyler Perry?" And I looked at him and I was like, "This fuck." So then Tyler Perry comes to the DGA and he gives, he's honored at the DGA, and he's honored with like 4 or 5 other people, and they showed these reels of, I mean, they were big name people. I think maybe Ron Howard and some other people, and from films that were iconic that we knew, and it was the DGA membership or elite were all there, the old retired Jewish people from New York, all in the theater, and we're all applauding, and the things from my childhood, I'm being moved by it. And then Tyler Perry's reel comes up, and there's like Medea, and this thing, and then that thing, and there's like a hush over the crowd, because most people don't know any of his movies, not the people in that theater, but my cousin knows it. My family knows it, and many of the people around me know it, but I felt the hush, and I was like, this is interesting. So when he got up on stage to speak, this is being recorded too, he said, I know I wasn't trained the way you all were. I know that the type of filmmaking that I do is not the type of filmmaking that you all do. But I speak to a particular audience. And when he said that, he won me. Exactly what I said before about voice and finding your unique place in this whole thing. And so I didn't like his work or appreciate his work prior to that. Hadn't sat through his stuff, but at that point I was like, they're honoring you for a reason, and you've done your thing, and you've reached all these people. You're doing it, man. I felt so proud of him at that moment. Like that quiet that was there before, I felt like, it changed something. The DNA of that room changed because they learned something. So whatever he's doing with the studio and how he does it, it's a beautiful thing. I go back to what she's saying though about access and stuff. Tyler Perry might still have to be validated by somebody. He's not created Hollywood, he created a studio. And somebody has to green light, somebody has to give permission, and that's the duality of this business, is that the gatekeepers are still few, and they usually don't look like Tyler Perry.
I have a question. Well, so it's interesting it's a question for me. I don't know what I'm going to say something and then I have a question about Tyler Perry's studio that maybe someone can answer. So when we looked at how to help build the film and television ecosystem in the Hudson Valley, we often would look at Georgia because it went from being like not on the map to being the third top destination location for film and television. And institutions and studios like Tyler Perry's did help make that ecosystem, right? They created more jobs, they locally created and produced content, they would hire people from Georgia. All those things are really important to me because I care about workforce development, economic development. I don't know if that has been sustained or not though. I just haven't are they still hiring local? Are they still shooting local? Because if so, to me, you've already accomplished something other than the content of your film. You're putting bread on people's table.
And he also ended a squash. The fact that he named one of the, I think, studios after Spike Lee, and all of that conversation on social media and the distinction and stuff, he was, respectful and humble and beautiful enough to say, Spike, you are part of what's made American cinema relevant. So Black American cinema, or American cinema, period.
No, I don't know if I should comment on Tyler Perry's studio, but I just say that, up in the Hudson Valley, I know nothing about his studio, but I know the buzz about it, but studios are not a big thing up here because people want to they're not working in New York City. And New York City, I worked in all of that, TVC and Magno and all those places, and that's all gone. And up here, like if you need a colorist or sound done for a film or an editor, they've got their little cabin by the river and they're going to be working in there. And you'll come to them and other people will come to them. I've used studios rarely in the city when I worked in the city, but I don't know that, a studio is just a place. So I'm not sure how it would apply up in our area. I'm not really sure about that. Don't have that experience, so.
Well, one of the reasons I asked the question is because he made a statement and before the whole red carpet event, revealing that he had this multi-acreage studio and right 5 minutes away from the Atlanta airport, 5 minutes away from downtown Atlanta. I actually graduated from Morehouse College and have had the opportunity to meet Spike, Sam Jackson, and even Bill Nunn. And so being trained in the theater myself, I understand the point of view what you were saying about not being attracted to the content and Tyler Perry, but him having an audience. But the point is, he said Hollywood didn't let me in or didn't invite me in or wouldn't, so I created my own Hollywood. And even though it's a studio, he is producing content, and he said this, he said, the reason why I'm able to do this at this capacity is because I've owned all my stuff. I've owned all my scripts, my theater productions. When he was doing the Chitlin circuit, he said he owned all his content with Medea, and and there were issues as a trained actor in the theater with black men being in dresses and the whole thing. But the point was, he said, I owned all my stuff. So anything that went to DVD back in the days, anything that has gone to Netflix, anything, he's been able to keep those revenue streams. And even if there are gatekeepers that still have to green light him at a certain level, Lionsgate Films and all this stuff, and the distributors and all that, he has said, and we're watching, he said, I own all my stuff and I'm creating opportunities for others.
Yeah. Well, that goes to just power. If you can't gain power within a system, create your own system, and he was really smart.
And there's other people want to ask questions, but this is me being the militant historian or whatever. Listen, I talk history, they call me militant. I don't think I'm militant at all. I'm the sweetest, gentlest person in the world, but it's history makes us uncomfortable. He's doing good stuff, and he took responsibility, and he's helping, and changing economic lives of the trajectory for people. But they always let in a one or two always break down the door. That's our history. Mm-hmm. There's always a few who are at the top of the chain who can dictate what other people. The measure is not what a few can do and how the few can have an impact on the trickle down, which is it's not me being ungrateful for what he's doing. I'm just saying he's doing his thing and it's gonna have an impact. But we live in a system where Jack Johnson can exist, Paul Robeson can exist, and go through all their struggles. We can count the Oprahs on our fingers, we can count this on our fingers, but understand, as long as we can count them on our fingers, there's a problem. And so it's beautiful that what he's doing, but this is a context. This is not Hollywood. This is a studio.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to ask the panel to talk a little more about reaching your audience. Nowadays you can film so much more cheaply than before. Shooting digital video is so much cheaper than shooting 35mm. Now you can get a drone instead of a helicopter. And as a result, there are many people making many films. I'm astounded to learn that there were over 3,000 submissions to this first session of a film festival in a little town.
Mm-hmm. Congratulations, Beth.
Yeah, that's
And there's a tremendous proliferation of film festivals as well. But how do you find your end audience when there are so few venues that reach sort of everybody? I mean, Netflix is kind of a wasteland. And how do you get to the people who should see your work? It's like the art world. I'm astounded by how many people are making art these days. I can't imagine there's enough people around to buy it. So it's kind of the same question for independent film.
Go ahead, Beth.
Me? Well, number one, something that I feel like we keep coming back to is make sure you're telling a great story, right? Like if the story is there, your audience is going to come a little bit more readily, right? But in terms of distribution, in terms of independent distribution, you know, I can speak from more of a documentary standpoint in terms of independent distribution. I think you have to identify who your audiences are, right? It's just like marketing, right? You have a marketing background, you have to identify your audiences, you have to figure out how those audiences consume content. Are they watching it on their phone? Are they watching it on a TV? Do they come to a theater? Do they come to their library, right? And then, you know, we're making a film about healthy masculinity in football culture right now. And it's really for young athletes to see it. So we're trying to figure out like how to do in-school, high school distribution with that, right? With professional football players. Because if professional football players talk to high school football players, there's a greater probability of change, right? But in terms of how do you make sure your film gets in a festival and gets broadcast or picked up by Netflix, it's a more complicated story there.
The thing about it is, and it's a beautiful question because that's the issue now. As soon as the process became democratized, the question is, who's gonna see this? And if everybody's making stuff, first off, it's a good thing everyone's creating art. Wherever that's happening, now art needs to be sold. Something just needs to be created. But people need to see it. People need to experience it. You're not making it for yourself. This shouldn't be masturbatory. It should be for an audience. Hitchcock said that film does not exist until an audience sits down to watch it. It's a social contract. So I didn't do it just to put it on my mom's shelf. You know, so that, I don't, oh, this is just for me. No. Not all that money, all that time. But I learned this the hard way. When you start making a film these days and you want an audience, you have to start thinking about the audience right away. I'm not talking about writing for the audience, not hack writing. I'm talking about how am I gonna connect with my audience? And the biggest mistake first-time filmmakers or early filmmakers make is thinking that their audience is everyone. The biggest mistake. You have to identify your niche. Who is going to watch this film? Where will they watch it? Why will they watch it? The guy who produced Jaws, he was the first producer who came to NYU to give a lecture when I was in my first year, and I'll never forget it. He said the film business is going to turn into magazines. There's a magazine for guns, one for sneakers, one for this. You don't have to reach everybody. Just satisfy your niche and reach them well, and you'll have your audience. So find your people. And so that's exactly what's happening. Studios started creating independent sections of their studios that cover these things, and almost everybody has done that. And now Netflix with algorithm is finding who watches this, I'm gonna send them this. So you as a filmmaker sit down and write, and this is what I learned. I didn't want to do distribution. I didn't want to learn it. I'm like, I'm an artist. I'm making this story, you know, it's gonna get out there. And it was an African filmmaker who was trying to get his movie into the Academy selection. And I didn't agree with his politics, but he said, either you think about your audience and distribution, or you don't survive. He said it's about survival. And it changed my thinking. So when you start writing, who's your audience? Your fundraising campaign, your behind the scenes, your Twitter, your Instagram, all that. If you don't have one, you're building one. You're creating one. Come along on this journey. Maybe they don't care about your topic, but they care about the town you're shooting in. Maybe they don't care about the town, but they care about the wardrobe or the music, like Spike. hey, are there any independent artists out there? Send us your music and we'll include it in our movie. Now you have thousands and thousands of small bands engaged, and the bands are telling all their fans to listen to, check out Spike's film, and then, and my movie made it in. My song made it into the movie. And now he has an audience of people who are supporting a song watching the film. You have to cultivate it. Other people, if you go to market and research experts, they'll bring partners in. I'm doing a film about abortion. You better connect with groups that are for it or against it and know you have your audience built in. You can start to build and cultivate. That's a part of it. But that's work. That is work. So when I went from an independent project to doing a television show where I didn't have to do any advertising or audience building, I slept so well. I don't have to do any work. I delivered my cut. I can go to sleep. As an independent filmmaker, whether you're making a short or a feature, it's a full-time job to connect to your audience and to get it to them.
Yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, I'm up against this right now, and I don't know if anybody saw Abby Disney's film, The Armor of Light. But, well, you see, you haven't seen it, right? Because you weren't in that church or in that community center. But she actually shared with me where she got the list of all these churches. Because that's what I'm up against right now. I want to reach low-income people of color. So a lot of people of color, it turns out, and a lot of white people too, go to church. And they go to their community churches. So the work to do on this stuff is unbelievable. But really, there are clever ways of doing it, like, the music, but whatever is, really pertinent to your film. If you just sit down and brainstorm, what are some ways we can reach these kids, that are like 14, 15, 16 years old? That's what I'm up against right now. I want to find kids who are still in high school, and even going back to almost the beginning of high school, before they figure out that there's nothing in life for them, and give them hope that there is a future, and show them people on film that look like them, that have gotten out of poverty by getting a college education. That's what the women in my film are telling. That's what their story is, and that's what they want to get out. So the work for me to do with connecting with these people is unbelievable. I was so happy I got that church list from Abby, because and do check out that film, The Armor of Light. It's an amazing, amazing documentary. But that's what we have to do, unless you're lucky enough to get a project where you don't have to do that. But that's what documentary is about now, is that there are so many different little ways you can slice the market. And if you can build from the beginning, and I think also for filmmakers, it's like envisioning, something bigger, or what's your vision? I have to think about, what's my vision for this documentary? What's my vision for this film? Not like where can I get it, or can I get it here, or can I get some distribution there? It's like, what's my vision? Why don't I just go with my vision? Why don't I just say, I want this to be really big. I want this to be a movement, about ending poverty one person at a time. What's wrong with that? So it's not always going to happen. It's not always going to happen. But I think, to start out with putting, I feel like it's like dreaming big is not a problem. And I think sometimes it's like dreaming too small might be the problem. But anyway, that's just my, my vision of the future, and just want to endorse, all the work that it is to get these things done. And you have to start out really early. So audience engagement, blah, blah, blah.
I forgot too that I used to be a digital strategist and did technology, and I was like, oh right, and then there's the internet too. So, how do advertisers get things in front of people, or to show up in, there's search engine optimization. There's stuff you can teach yourself. If you want to, make a website or get your video on YouTube or whatever, you can do a whole lot of stuff if you know your audience and who you're trying to reach. and you tailor your digital strategy for however you're releasing that film online. So you can reach a ton of people without having to have people step into a room ever.
Sorry, think big, crucial. That was the thing about does this need to exist. If you take the does it need to exist and think big and have a vision for it, and then you find your niche, think about how those things reinforce one another. But you just said it. I'm sorry to take the mic, but I guess I was tired when I got here, and now I'm woken up. Like, a big mistake that I made, and that's I think I teach when I teach my students, like, because I've made so many mistakes. It's beautiful. I get to give it to you. When I started using the internet to promote my films, I was excited when this website wanted my film and that website wanted my film and this institution. And then somebody, a businessman, said, well, how does it have value if you put it everywhere? The independent filmmaker in me wanted everybody to see it. But he was like, it loses its value when you do that. This is why you have to go to HBO to watch Game of Thrones. Like, what if you had one website, whether it was Vimeo or YouTube, that was the only way they could see it, and they couldn't download it. So now the numbers of people watching your stuff is consistent because it's the same place. People have to come to that church to see the thing. It was, every filmmaker wants to be in every festival and as many festivals as possible. But what happens if you target a few and make those screenings the only time you're going to be able to see this film? There are ways to manipulate the system so that you can have a maximum effect. You don't have to get it to everybody. Though we want everyone to see the film, there's a time and a place for that. But imagine if everyone had to come to the same place for it. We have to bring our audiences along.
I know you got a question.
Yeah, just throughout the discussion tonight, I just kind of remembered a scene in the movie Blood Diamond, where Jennifer Connelly's reporting what's happening, and she's frustrated because she's like, this article, it's all bullshit, and sorry, camera, but like, it'll get people to send in a couple checks, but it won't shut down the diamond trading business. And I feel like that happens with a lot of issues where we kind of have sort of crises of the month that will rally and will fund, but as filmmakers, do you think there's an important aspect we're missing, or where, like my sociology teacher said, no changes have ever come from a stable society. It's always when that society revolted that changes were made. Is there like an important aspect that you think we're missing as filmmakers, or that we can implement, that will not just get checks sent in, but will actually change our institution? And like what your ideas are on that.
Change the institution of Hollywood, or change any institution?
Or in regards to, say, race, or, the Me Too movement was big, and I think the Me Too movement was so successful because it was not just like, oh, this is a movie about it. It's like, we are the people working in the industry, and this is what's happening behind the screens, and it was like very real. But like as filmmakers on screen, do you think there's anything we can convey using our medium that will get such a reaction where maybe we're not quite hitting that yet? Or do you have more or less any ideas as to using the medium to not just get checks donated to certain causes, but really bring down some of the problems we have? And it's okay if you don't have an answer, I was just curious.
Well, I think you're right on with the question. I mean, the Russian Revolution didn't hire Eisenstein to be their publicist for no reason. Or what did they hire him for? They hired him to be minister of whatever. But they knew the power of film is tremendous. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure that it can do that. I'm sure it can make big changes. And whether or not we realize that power is, sort of up to us.
Blood Diamond had a huge audience engagement campaign, right? So they actually did work with that film and partners who are working in that industry to try to change things in that industry. So I can't think of something I have seen on screen alone that has made that sea change, but I have seen tons of fantastic issue-driven films that have been partnered with audience engagement impact campaigns that have made real substantial change in the area of focus that they're working in. So I worked on a film on the death penalty, and our audience engagement campaign was really focused on states that hadn't repealed the death penalty yet. And we saw change takes a long time, right? Like, it's hard for an immediate change. You can look at change theory and it takes years. But we actually did, no one ever does this with their audience engagement campaigns. We had someone go back 10 years after the film was made and look at kind of the traveling path of that film and death penalties being repealed in states. And it had an impact. So I'm not saying it's just the film, it was our partners, like we had the right partners, we had advocates that were using the film, but the film was a tool for them.
Well, I mean, there are examples right now.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about? I mean, what were the two films? It was 13, and what was the other one? Come on.
How they see us.
Yeah.
What?
How they see us.
No, the films about incarceration that had a big impact. One of the subjects in my current documentary works with formerly incarcerated. She's formerly incarcerated, and she works with formerly incarcerated people. And she told me that 13 and the other film that is slipping out of my brain right now. The two films that came out at the same time.
Yep.
13th and the other one was whatever. Have had a big impact. What was it?
No, it's been a long day, I can't.
Yeah, it's been a long day. But those two films together about incarceration had a huge impact and really gave good impetus to the movement to reform criminal justice. So there are lots of films that I think have done this.
I mean, your
Can't
question.
think of any right now, but
Equally as good, but I said equally as good as those two films, which the second one, I don't remember the title, was another one, but it was released in the 2000s, early 2000s, The Farm, as
that's
well.
oh right, yeah.
Incarceration,
Yeah.
but it didn't have the same impact.
No.
And it's an amazing
Well,
documentary.
There's nothing as powerful as an idea whose time has come. And you have to, I mean, I remember once, trying to get something sold too soon. You have to feel what's going on, and it's got to be the timing. The timing is really, really important.
And you have no control over that. Like, that's the thing. You get. I think one of my colleagues said the best scripts he's ever read have never been made. And that's they didn't find they weren't in the world. And then there are films that if they had come out 10 years earlier or 10 years later, they could have had such an impact. We don't have. That's the thing. There's things that we have control over, and then there's things that we don't have control
I think
over.
you have a little bit of control over that. I mean,
well,
say you've got an old script 5 years old, and you shopped it around, nobody wanted it, and then all of a sudden you're watching the news, you're seeing what's going on, and you're saying, hey, wait a second, you've got a hook for your script right there. And I think that's as filmmakers we watch for those things. So there's a little bit of control.
Yeah, what I'm saying is we have control of making and putting it out there.
Oh
What
yeah,
what
but we don't
happens
know.
once it's out there?
Yeah, right,
we
Exactly.
there's no way to know. You can make the most important film in the world that people need to see that the revolution is going to happen and things are going to change, how we treat men and women, and racism is going to end. But September 11th happens.
Yeah, I know that's.
And no one goes to the theater.
Yeah.
So that's the magic of what we do. There is no rhyme or reason. It's the youngest art form in existence, pretty much. A film is really fairly new, and how it impacts the world is fairly new. But to your question is so much deeper than this. Like, films can move the needle here and move the needle there, but you're talking about what the character said. The money is going to keep flowing. The diamond industry ain't stopping, so we can move the needle a little bit, but things aren't, so I go to something that Robert Redford said when he was asked about this film have the ability to change this world. And not to take away from everything that was said, I think that it's the movements, it's the politicians, it's the conversations, it's the books, it's the songs. Those are the things, it's the individual artist just creating that's going to change things, right? But Robert F. was asked this question, and his response was, I think he's talking about Butch Cassidy. He said, it was a really popular film, everybody loved it, but you know what it changed? People started wearing these type of pants.
Definitely fashion. Fashion
Right?
is definitely influenced by films.
And he summed up his answer by saying, no, I don't really think it has that much impact besides how people dress and how they and this is Redford being interviewed at Sundance, but he said, but I'm still not gonna stop trying. I'm not gonna stop trying.
I think really quickly, that's a very important thing because films mirror the images and ways of society. But I want to ask a quick question, and then I'll shut up for the evening, about the Me Too movement, because the Me Too movement has sent shockwaves not only across America, but throughout the world as it relates to film. And I just want to get your opinion. Have you visibly seen changes on the inside of the industry as filmmakers when you look at the Me Too movement as it relates to Bill Cosby and juxtaposing to Harvey Weinstein? Because when we look at those two individuals, race comes in, and in society, listening to the chatter on social media, listening to the chatter in this community, other communities that I travel, and even with high school students that I teach history to. It's like, well, all right, here's this Me Too movement. Here's the film and television industry, two powerful men. One is African American, one is white Jewish American. One is sitting in prison right now for 70 years, and one isn't. So the question is, have you seen visibly a change, one, since the Me Too movement, and how does that play into those two individuals and race?
Well, I think the change is, there's absolutely a change, because like we talked about before, because the conversation has started, there's no going back. If a woman wants to feel empowered now, she has something behind her. So I think the change has already happened. And it certainly happened with the Weinstein Company. And, as far as the rest of the film business, I mean, you guys can...
Okay, so I think changes happened for women feeling that they can come out and speak about the things that are happening to them, and that is huge. Do I think our legal system has changed to be able to equally prosecute a white man and a black man? No. Do I think Harvey Weinstein hopefully will get his day in jail? Yes. But, I think I have seen change on an individual or even a collective impact among women. But I agree with you that I think that people will see inequality in how people are prosecuted for it for now.
Yeah, I mean, that's a beautiful answer. There's a system outside of Hollywood that's still in play. The important thing about the Me Too movement is the consciousness that on a film set, men think twice sometimes. Like they just think twice, not necessarily once anymore. They take that second thing and they just think about it, and that's change. And a woman on a film set might be hyper sensitive and aware of her place, and it also makes the men think twice. And sometimes people are getting it wrong. There are sets that have decided to use coding. I don't even know if they talk about this in public, but if someone says something that could be potentially uncomfortable, you can say a color code, and so people can cut back or understand it. That made someone uncomfortable. I think someone tried it and some people didn't like it. Women and men, it's but some people liked it because it gave them some power and some control. So that's something that's happening visibly. I don't know anything about Harvey Weinstein and Bill Cosby besides what the media tells me, so I won't comment on that. But I will say that what was the Weinstein Company and the power of that company and the amount of students who used to go and intern there and the green lighting ability that he had, something has changed.
That's gone.
So, again, Pence.
I want to take one more question, and then I think we picked their brains enough for the evening. So, Nancy, did you have a question?
I didn't get your name, I'm sorry.
Alrick.
Alrick.
Hi. I want to say that I've had some professors that have made profound differences in my life. And I'm not going to school right now, but I wish I was, because I think you're just a fabulous.
Yes, agreed.
I also wanted to say, as far as independent directors, have you ever thought, because the other thing you said was your safe place was watching TV and the Transformers, and when you said there's war out there and my TV is my escape, to me that's an awesome film. Because it could speak, it speaks to me as far as, I mean, your war, I could have a war as a child also. My war might not be where I was located as growing up. It might be an emotional war. It might be, you know, God forbid, a physical, traumatic war in myself. And my escape might have been the TV also.
Is it possible for the last statement to be from the audience? I mean, I think you already said it. And I'm not unique in that war outside and war inside. I think films have been done about that. Think about it. Think about how many characters there are that the world that they're living in isn't their world, and so they create a new one for themselves. That is the universal experience. And that's what I think that the point I was trying to make about my travels is everybody is searching for that same story. And that's what binds us.
Well, I just want to thank all of you. I knew this was going to be a good panel, and I loved every minute of it, just hearing you guys speak about this. And I just want to say thank you guys very much.
Thank you all for being here.
Thanks to EastxNorthEast.
Thank you so much. Way to drop the